everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com. It's Tuesday morning and you know what that means. It's time for some lovely wrestling news. There's some news from all over the place. We've got some news from last night's Raw. We have some other WWE news from behind the scenes. So without any further ado, let's take a look at those lovely headlines. First of all, WWE have reportedly released a long-serving figure. Next up, a former WWE Champion returned last night on Monday Night Raw. And finally, a Raw superstar has been pulled from the upcoming men's Money in the Bank ladder match. So let's start off with some news from our old friend Dave Meltzer, who last night wrote a story saying that WWE had apparently released their long-standing employee Gerald Brisco. Now, Meltzer didn't clarify exactly when this news came to light or when exactly Brisco was released, but it seemed to imply in the wording of his article that Brisco was the last name to come to light from all of these recent releases. So maybe he was released originally and it just wasn't widely reported upon, or maybe this is a more recent revelation and the release actually only happened in the past few days or so. And of course, Gerald Brisco has been with WWE for decades now. He first joined the company in the mid-80s alongside his brother Jack Brisco. They were a tag team together, but then before long, Gerald retired from in-ring competition and transitioned into more of a backstage role. But as many of us remember, he actually did appear on screen quite a lot during the Attitude Era. As well as his real-life role as an advisor of Vince McMahon, he also was a stooge on screen, wasn't he, in the aftermath of the Montreal Screwjob, when Vince became more of a heelish authority figure and needed Pat Patterson and Gerald Brisco to back him up and to meddle in the matches to ensure that Vince basically got his way, and often to try and make sure that Steve Austin didn't win. It didn't always work. In fact, it rarely worked. His name, of course, will also be forever tied to the Montreal Screwjob because he was supposed to be one of the few people that knew about the incident before it actually happened. He was one of the few people that Vince trusted with this plan to screw Bret out of the title. And with his Oklahoma amateur wrestling background, Brisco also became a top talent scout backstage in WWE and is said to have been quite largely responsible for the scouting and the signing of one Brock Lesnar, as well as many other wrestlers who have that amateur background. And of course, very recently, Gerald Brisco even became the 24/7 champion before losing it seconds later to Kelly Kelly. In his piece, Meltzer describes Gerald Brisco as one of the best pro wrestlers of the 70s and early 80s, both as a World Junior Heavyweight Champion and holding multiple tag team titles with older brother Jack Brisco, who, incidentally, was one of the greatest pro wrestlers, Meltzer says, who ever lived. There's no reports yet as to the reason why Brisco has been let go, although I have seen quite a few bits of speculation online since this story dropped, which are suggesting that at 73 years of age, maybe he also just wanted to take time away from WWE to let go and to enjoy a nice peaceful retirement. But that is pure speculation. I don't actually know myself, but it does sort of make sense. I mean, 73, you'd expect him to sort of want to step away maybe and relax a little bit, but then you could say the same for Vince, and of course that's not the way things are going at all. Next up, after quite a long stint on the sidelines, a former WWE Champion returned to the ring last night on Raw, and his name is Jinder Mahal. It's still weird, isn't it? It's still weird that he was WWE Champion. Do you feel the same? I sometimes just forget and then remember it, and then I'm like, wow, that happened. Now, I'm not suggesting that Jinder didn't work hard to achieve that position, of course, and I'm not suggesting that it's not good to see him back, because it is. It's always great to see somebody who's been out with injury make a return to the ring. The only drawback for me here is that he beat my boy, or one of my boys, Akira Tozawa, in a dominant performance, and I love Tozawa, and that made me sad. But yeah, Jinder is back, it seems, and back with the bang. He's been out for getting on towards a year now. He sustained an injury to his patella last year in a match against Ali at a house show, and since then has been undergoing surgery to have that, all healed up, and then subsequently recovering from that surgery. And now it looks as though he's all ready to go with a slightly different look, actually. You might have noticed if you watched Raw that Jinder was sporting a shorter haircut, oddly reminiscent maybe of his days in the three-man band alongside Drew McIntyre and lovely Heath Slater. It's pretty much exactly the same as the three-man band, actually, except for the air guitar and the eye makeup has been replaced by squashing former Dragon Gate Open the Brave Gate champions, so bit different, I suppose. It seems as though Jinder might be in line for a push because the victory over Tozawa was so dominant, and also it just makes sense, doesn't it? Often we see guys return from injury and get a sustained push to boost them further up the card. However, if we contrast that with the situation involving Sheamus, it's not always a guarantee, is it? That's because Sheamus came back and was doing similar to what Jinder did last night. He was squashing folks left, right and centre, but then that storyline didn't really go anywhere. We're still kind of waiting for it to develop, really, and he did of course miss out on the WrestleMania 36 6 card, so we're still waiting for that. So there's no real clues as to what's in store for Jinder, really. He could be on the end of a sustained push, especially given the relatively sparse roster at the moment, but on the other hand, it could just be to fill a gap, and he might not be receiving a push at all. Let me know what you think is going to happen to Jinder in the comment section down below. Rest assured though, whatever happens, he certainly won't be hindered, will he? Next up, Mandy Rose has spoken on the storyline with Otis in an interview with TV Insider and claims that she was actually surprised at the wild popularity of the angle. If you somehow missed that storyline, you didn't, but I'll just give a very brief recap. Otis was falling in love with Mandy, Dolph Ziggler swooped in through a little bit of sneakiness and managed to sort of steal her away. Otis was furious and heartbroken. Then it all turns out that Dolph Ziggler had been colluding with Sonya Deville, Mandy's tag team partner, to keep Otis and Mandy apart. This plan all came to light on the SmackDown before WrestleMania, and at WrestleMania, Otis defeated Dolph Ziggler with the help of Mandy, and they had a lovely Macho Man and Elizabeth style embrace after the match, and a little cheeky kiss as well. It was just great. And in this interview with TV Insider, Mandy Rose said this: putting smiles on people's faces is what we do. I was happy with how it resonated so well with fans. Everyone has loved the whole story, and the final moments with Otis and I at the end. I think the overall feedback I got was just what a happy moment and a genuine response from everyone during such a tough time we're in right now. However, she did admit that she was a little bit taken aback by the popularity of the story. It did sort of take on a life of its own, despite being firmly kind of a mid-card angle. She says, I don't think we thought it was going to be such a big story. We never anticipated it being this big, but once we started, I remember the segment before Christmas with Otis and I backstage with the whole ham as a gift. I remember giving him the kiss on the cheek, and everyone on social media was like, oh my god. She goes on, the crowd, I could hear them. We had a feeling that we had something good, and I'm really grateful for it all. That's really great to see, and it's great to see that the storyline has benefited Mandy and Otis quite so much as it has. It also could go on potentially to benefit Sonya Deville as well. She recently fully turned on Mandy. I mean, you could argue that that had happened anyway, but that was really solidified recently on TV. And yeah, it could benefit Sonya as well. She could be in for a bit of a heel push. Mandy's now a fully fledged babyface, and Otis is just, I mean, his popularity is absolutely skyrocketing. But what about Tucker? There is, of course, a sad element to this storyline, as the writer who wrote the Otis and Mandy storyline revealed online that she was included in those recent WWE releases, which is very sad to see. And it kind of goes to show that a lot of these releases might not necessarily be about the quality of your work, because how could you release someone who'd written such gold and such well-received storytelling just so recently before her release? Next up, let's take a look at that superstar who has been pulled for some reason, although we don't quite know why yet, but pulled from the upcoming men's Money in the Bank ladder match. Apollo Crews is the superstar in question, recently defeating MVP, of all people, to secure his spot in the match. However, last night on Raw, things took a turn, and it was a very eventful night for Apollo Crews all in all. First of all, it started off really well. He secured a pinfall victory over the reigning US champion Andrade in a 6-man tag team match, a match that was Apollo, Rey Mysterio, and Aleister Black taking on Zelina Vega's stable, Andrade, Angel Garza, and Austin Theory. And yeah, Apollo Crews picked up the victory in that match, a pinfall victory over the reigning United States champion. Great stuff. Then backstage, Andrade was furious and basically talked trash to Apollo and stepped up to him, and they had a bit of a macho encounter, and Apollo Crews just slapped the face off Andrade. Find that online if you can. There's clips going around of Andrade just on the receiving end of such a loud slap from Apollo. Zelina Vega was provoked enough by this to grant Apollo Crews a title shot at Andrade's United States Championship later on that night, and Andrade went on to win the match. But that's not the biggest story here. The biggest story is how Apollo lost the match and the consequences of that loss. Andrade was targeting the knee of Apollo throughout the match, and then towards the end, he came off the top rope, Apollo this is, and jammed his knee upon landing on the canvas, fell to the floor, and the referee waved the match off. But if there were any fears that this was a legit injury for Apollo, it does seem to be a kayfabe injury because of how WWE responded later on in the night. We saw a clip of Apollo just devastated backstage, hobbling, so gutted that his knee was hurt and that his opportunity at the Money in the Bank ladder match was about to be taken away. I think that means it's 99% not a real injury, surely. Although it could be one of those instances where he's planning a bit of recuperation maybe from other injuries, and this was a storyline to write him out so he can go off and recover. I'm not quite certain about that. That again is just speculation. However, it does seem to be entirely a kayfabe knee injury. And WWE later did officially confirm that Apollo had been pulled from the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. Again, we don't know the reason behind this, because in the current state of the Raw roster, with other people having to fill in gaps and everything, Apollo was getting a bit more time than usual, and he did seem to be making the most of it. He had a bit of momentum behind him, and I'm quite sad that they've taken this away. But yeah, as I suggested, we don't know the reason behind this decision quite yet. As I mentioned, it could be to give him time to recover from injuries that we don't quite know about. It could be because they don't want him in the match. They want someone else in who they've got in mind to replace him. The replacement, by the way, has not been announced yet. We don't have a clue who that is. It could be because they don't think he's a good fit for the match, but I think that's very unlikely given the athletic nature of Apollo Crews, and I think the fact that he could bring something extra to that match would be really exciting. So I don't really understand why they've pulled him from the match, but rest assured, we will keep you updated if further details emerge. And yes, as I mentioned, there is no word yet on who's going to replace Crews in the match, but the other competitors currently still in the match are Rey Mysterio, Aleister Black, Daniel Bryan, and King Corbin. And then Otis and Dolph Ziggler are going to have a match on SmackDown this week to decide the final SmackDown spot. And finally, recently released wrestler Deonna Purrazzo, formerly of NXT and occasionally Monday Night Raw as well, has spoken a little bit more on her experiences in NXT and WWE on the whole, and kind of what this meant for her and how she feels about this release. Purrazzo's done a few interviews and chats recently where she's talked about certain things that went on in NXT behind the scenes, and it's been very, very interesting. Not entirely controversial, but in this one she goes into some specifics about what happened to her, and it kind of gives us a bit more of an inkling of how things work backstage. So, in an interview with Sportskeeda, Purrazzo said, "We were told in NXT that we would be debuting from Triple H. We here is herself and Chelsea Green, who of course we now know debuted on NXT as a singles wrestler with a manager, but not alongside a tag partner in Deonna Purrazzo." But that's what Purrazzo's suggesting was told to them first by Triple H. She goes on, Triple H kind of asked us to brainstorm ideas for vignettes and backstage things, and this was right when NXT was going live. She said he was like, "You might not get the chance to be on TV every week in the ring, but if we can do backstage stuff or things that are done at home, just come up with any and all ideas and shoot them to creative." But Purrazzo says that herself and Chelsea Green did that. She says, "We did that twice and we never heard anything back, and then it was Chelsea who was going to debut without me, but I would come in when I was ready, and I probably squashed that a little bit because I flipped out." She also talked a little bit about her experiences on Monday Night Raw, where she had one or two little singles matches and it never really went anywhere, and it was a little bit confusing. She says Triple H brought herself and Chelsea Green to Raw in December last year, but they ended up working singles matches where she lost to Asuka and Chelsea lost to Charlotte Flair, rather than again tag matches, which they might have expected. Purrazzo then says, "We impressed people at Raw and we just kept being asked back, but then we got brought back down to NXT and were told it wasn't meant to be a call-up, so that was just a lot of confusion on everyone's ends and what was happening with us, especially with myself and Chelsea." So basically, to summarise that, Purrazzo was understandably frustrated because she was told to pitch ideas alongside Chelsea Green in NXT for an eventual debut on TV as a tag team, and then Chelsea Green debuted as a singles superstar. And also, when they were on Raw, there seemed to be a bit of confusion on both ends. Triple H brought them along as if to say to Vince, "Hey, look at these potential Raw superstars," and then Vince put them in some matches, and then it's almost like, and this is again speculation, it's almost like Vince just forgot. Would you put that past him? I wouldn't. I don't know what you're talking about. So very interesting stuff there from Purrazzo, but it's nice to see that she seems to be happy to be back on the independent scene, and hopefully when this whole situation's over and things get up and running again, we can see her thrive in a women's division of a major promotion. If that's what she wants to do, maybe she wants to work for other promotions, all women's promotions, who knows, whatever she wants to do, I hope she thrives in it, because she is good, and if you've never seen her before, do check out some of her matches. And that's it for today's news video. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. My match recommendation is just any Deonna Purrazzo match you can get your hands on, and then let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Thanks very much for watching once again. Stay safe out there, stay positive, and I'll see you very soon.